You check your phone screen after locking the door, not because it buzzed, but because your hand moved there on its own. For a second, you feel like you might have missed something, even though nothing happened. You stand there, keys still in your hand, aware of yourself in a way that feels unnecessary. It is the same feeling that makes you lower the volume when a video feels too personal, even when no one else is home, or the way you adjust your posture while sitting alone, as if posture still matters to someone. These movements happen quietly, without explanation. Sometimes it shows up when you close your laptop. You hesitate before shutting it, not because of unfinished work, but because the ending feels observed. The room is empty, yet something in you stays slightly alert. I used to think this was just habit, a leftover reflex from living around other people, but habits usually fade when no one is watching, and this one does not. There is a particular stillness that comes with being truly alone. And no footsteps, no voices, no expectations pressing in. And yet, inside that stillness, there is often a sense of being registered, not watched in a dramatic way, more like noticed. As if your actions are leaving impressions somewhere, even when there is nowhere for them to land. In everyday adult life, this shows up in small, almost embarrassing ways. You rehearse what you would say if someone asked what you were doing. You minimize a browser window that no one else can see. You feel a flicker of self-consciousness while making coffee. Sometimes it even appears in your facial expression. You soften it or neutralize it, as if emotion itself should be moderated, even when the only witness is the kitchen wall. Psychology reveals that much of human behavior is shaped by imagined presence. We do things not only for others, but for the idea of others. Still, that explanation feels too clean for something this subtle, because this feeling does not always come with an audience in mind. It comes without a face, without a voice, sometimes without any clear reason at all. There are moments when I catch myself pausing mid-thought, as if my thoughts themselves could be overheard. That realization unsettles me more than I expect. Thoughts are supposed to be private. Researchers suggest that the mind builds internal observers early in life, but knowing that does not dissolve the sensation. It only names it. What feels more interesting is when the feeling intensifies during moments that should feel free. Late at night, early mornings, Sundays when nothing is scheduled and no one is calling. In those moments, you might notice a quiet performance starting. You clean a little. You organize something that does not need organizing. You delay resting by adding small, unnecessary tasks. It can feel irresponsible to do nothing. As if stillness itself needs permission. As if being unseen requires justification. This is not about productivity. It is not about morality. It is about visibility. Human behavior often shifts in response to perceived visibility, even imagined visibility. The body responds before the mind explains. Decision-making follows patterns that feel personal, but are widely shared. At least, that is what I tell myself. Still, there are times when that explanation feels like avoidance, like a way to stay comfortable with something that might deserve closer attention. Because if no one is watching, why does it feel like someone is? And why does that feeling change how we move through space? There is a moment in many American homes where the TV is on purely for sound, not for content, not for interest, just for the sense that something is happening. Silence can feel too exposed, not empty, but open. As if it invites something you are not ready to meet. I have caught myself narrating my actions internally, the way people do when explaining themselves, except there is no one to explain anything to. That realization lands slowly. Cognitive patterns often operate beneath awareness. They feel like instincts. They do not announce themselves as learned. What makes this pattern difficult to notice is how normal it feels. Everyone does it, which means no one talks about it. You might recognize it when you hesitate before crying alone, or when you stop yourself from expressing something, even in private. The interruption arrives before the emotion fully forms. At first, this seems like self-control, then it starts to feel like something else. Something more relational. If part of you believes that being alone is temporary, that someone could appear at any moment, that your current state might need to be justified, this belief does not always come from paranoia. Often, it comes from familiarity. A life lived in shared spaces leaves echoes, but sometimes, the echo feels louder than the source. Sometimes, it feels like the room itself is listening. I once tried to test this by intentionally doing something strange while alone. Nothing extreme, just something I would not do if someone were present. The discomfort surprised me. Not fear, not guilt, just resistance. That resistance made me pause. I started wondering who exactly I was resisting, and the answer was not clear. There is a quiet assumption in adult life that independence means privacy, that being alone means being unobserved. But emotionally, that line is not as solid as it sounds. You can live by yourself and still feel monitored. Not by cameras, not by neighbors. By something internal that learned to stay alert. Psychology reveals that awareness of self is often tied to imagined feedback. We shape ourselves based on how we expect to be perceived. Even when perception is hypothetical, this pattern does not fade with age. If anything, it becomes more refined. The observer grows quieter, more subtle. It shows up in how you edit your own reactions, how you soften your expressions, how you decide what version of yourself is acceptable, even in solitude. Sometimes you even anticipate regret before pleasure fully arrives. If enjoyment must be brief to remain acceptable. If lingering too long might draw attention. I used to think this was discipline, maturity, a sign of emotional control. Then one night, I realized I was avoiding a thought, not because it was dangerous, because it felt too visible. That moment made me uncomfortable with my own certainty. Thoughts feel exposed. What does privacy actually mean? Researchers suggest that the mind maintains internalized social presence as a way to predict outcomes, to avoid harm. To stay connected. That makes sense. But connection can turn into surveillance without anyone noticing, especially when it feels normal, especially when it feels responsible. You might notice it when you imagine explaining your life choices to someone who is not there, or when you feel embarrassed about something no one knows. The emotion arrives fully formed, without a witness. Emotional triggers do not always require external stimuli. Sometimes, they activate in response to imagined judgment. Sometimes, the judgment has no clear source. This is where the pattern quietly shapes your life. Not in big decisions. In the small ones. What you allow yourself to enjoy. How long you linger in certain feelings. Whether you let yourself rest without earning it. Whether silence feels safe or wasteful. There is a subtle tension in these moments. A sense that you are being evaluated by a standard you did not consciously choose. The standard feels old. I have noticed that this internal presence becomes louder during transitions. After a breakup, after a move, after success, after moments when attention briefly increases and then disappears. When identity feels less stable, observation feels more intense. If the mind checks itself more often when it is unsure. If uncertainty invites scrutiny. This makes self-awareness feel less like clarity and more like pressure. You are aware, but not necessarily free. The awareness tightens rather than opens. Human behavior often adapts to pressure without naming it. We call it preference. We call it personality. We call it being realistic. We rarely call it fear, But fear might not be the right word either. It is too sharp. This feeling is softer. It is the sense that you are accountable, even when no one asked you to be, that your inner life has an audience, even if it never speaks, that something is keeping score without revealing the rules. Sometimes I wonder if this is why stillness feels productive only when it looks intentional, why rest feels better when it resembles effort, why enjoyment sometimes needs justification before it can be fully felt. These thoughts are not conclusions. They are observations that feel unfinished. They surface, then recede. Because there are also moments when the feeling disappears. Brief, quiet moments when you forget yourself completely. When there is no observer, when action happens without commentary. Those moments do not announce themselves. They pass quickly, but they feel different. Not lighter, just unmonitored. I do not know what determines when those moments appear. I only know that noticing the contrast changes something. Once you see the observer, it does not disappear. Still, the act of noticing creates space, not resolution, space. And in that space, a question lingers without asking to be answered. Whether the feeling of being watched is something imposed on you, or something you learn to carry so well that it feels like part of who you are. The thought stays quiet.